Hello all and welcome to my first 7 minutes or less. We've all got a list of games we'd like to play. My list of Wii games alone is long enough. The biggest problem is deciding which ones to play first, but occasionally I find one for an absolute bargain and can finally cross it off the list. Such was the case with Muramasa, the Demon Blade. A friend once showed me Dust, an Elysium Tale for the Xbox Live Arcade, which was a 2D side-scrolling hack-and-slash RPG, and it looked amazing, so I wanted to get a game along similar lines. I did a bit of research and came across Muramasa, the Demon Blade, but from the reviews of the game, it sounded like an underappreciated gem, so I had to give it a go and see what all the fuss was about. There are two protagonists for you to choose from. Kisuke is a ninja who has been branded a traitor but conveniently has amnesia, so travels across the land hoping to find out what happened. Momohime is a princess but has been possessed by the spirit of the swordsman who was intending to possess someone else and is now looking for a particular sword that will enable him to acquire a new body. Of course there's a bit more to each story than that, but of the two I much preferred Kisuke, as not only is his story a bit simpler and easier to follow, but it's also much more personal.
すまなんだの命があるの
何言ってやがんだ弱音は吐かね
そうであったなでもやはり死なないでおくれ
You may have noticed that all the talking is in Japanese, so if you don't like having to read subtitles, you probably won't get on with this game. Luckily, I prefer subtitles over dubbing, and while there's a lot of Japanese mythology and folklore in Muramasa, you don't have to know all about them in order to understand what's going on. As with all 2D side-scrolling games, all you do is go from one side of the screen to the other, following the arrow to your next destination. Luckily, the map is fairly easy to understand, so it's pretty difficult to get lost even though some of the areas are absolutely massive. It's pretty much the same as any 2D side-scroller. You travel from A to B, fight a few baddies along the way, confront a boss at point B, and then have to go somewhere else for plot convenience. This can cause a fair amount of backtracking, but during the backtracking, at least the game cuts down on the number of battles you get into, or even eliminates them completely, so it doesn't take long to run back through all the towers, fields and villages. As always, there are shops to buy equipment and healing items, plus other things to do while you're travelling around. There is some form of exploration involved, but that just amounts to whether you decide to go directly towards your goal or see what lies down the road in the opposite direction. In order to prevent you from going places you shouldn't, there are barriers around which can only be destroyed by using a certain sword, which is obtained from defeating a certain boss, which leads us nicely to the next subject. You get a tutorial at the start of the game teaching you the techniques you can perform, and there are a fair few things to learn. There are two types of swords you can use: long swords, which are powerful with decent reach but slow, and short swords, which, as you might guess, are weaker and shorter but much faster, allowing for higher combos. The combat is really good, and you fight a variety of enemies in your travels, some requiring a particular tactic in order to defeat. Sure, most of them you can just wail on until they fall over, but others require more planning. The bosses you fight are really imaginative, some being drawn from myths or legends. As Momohime's path is separate from Kisuke's, they both fight different bosses, and each boss has its own strategy for defeating. As always, some bosses are easier than others, but they're still great fights. Justin has also played Muramasa, but he said he wasn't too keen on it because he found the combat to be too repetitive, as he wound up just using the same combo over and over again. While I can see where he's coming from, I found there to be enough variation due to forging. The swords you obtain from bosses are also used as a basis for forging new ones. Each sword does a usual attack increase, some have bonus attributes, but each sword has a secret art. Each time you use a sword's secret art, it decreases the sword's soul power, as does blocking and deflecting enemy attacks, and you have to return the sword to its sheath in order for it to regain its power. You have 3 katanas equipped at all times, and switching between them is what keeps the combat fairly new, because once you forge and equip new ones, the secret arts at your disposal change, so you'll have to adapt your battle strategy to incorporate the new arts. If a sword power depletes completely, the sword breaks, lowering its offensive and defensive capabilities. When this happens, you have to wait for it to completely regain its power before you can use the repaired sword and its secret art again, so you really have to keep an eye on each sword's spirit power as well as your own health to avoid a mild case of death. your travels, you'll visit various places and the sceneries range from absolutely gorgeous to strangely haunting. While some backdrops get used in multiple places, most of them are still stunning even after you've seen them several times. In the same vein, the soundtrack can be a bit repetitive too. Luckily, the tracks for the most part are pretty decent, so I didn't mind having tracks pop up regularly as I quite like them. Aside from the main game, there are a few things to keep you coming back for more. There are 3 difficulty settings, and while I haven't tried the hardest one yet, Shura had its frustrating moments, especially when it came to the enemy lairs. Each lair has a recommended level, but these are ridiculous. The one being shown right now recommends that you are at least level 9. You get prizes for completing them, like equipment, and you can get some decent experience, so they're worth doing even if they can be a bit of a pain. While there are a few other things, one of the biggest surprises for me was that as Momohime and Kisuke's parts are separate, you are also able to access the other characters' areas once you finish the game. Just be prepared to get slaughtered. For Wii owners, or even Wii U owners who are looking for something a little different to the usual party minigames, Muramasa the Demon Blade could be just what you're looking for. Granted, the combat can get a little stale at times, but there's plenty of other stuff going on to keep you interested, even if it's just to see what crazy boss you'll be fighting next. It's certainly an underappreciated gem, and I highly recommend you play it as soon as possible. See you next time.